Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you may be in the world. My name is Sophia Arend, and I'm the Global Blockchain Business Council's Communications and Content Lead. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Global Blockchain Business Council and Global Digital Finance's Global Leaders Series. This is a weekly global town hall we host with policymakers and business leaders to hear their insights into their work, the state of the blockchain and digital asset industry, and current global affairs. Today, we have the pleasure to be joined by Catherine Jones. She is CEO of Creative HQ, and GBBC's Chief Operating Officer, Mercina Tillemann. They will have a conversation and live audience Q&A on Creative HQ, which is New Zealand's leading provider of innovation programs. And they will also discuss Catherine's journey to leading the organization and her views on the future of work and innovation. So just before we begin, I'd like to briefly introduce Catherine. As I mentioned, she's the CEO of Creative HQ. She is a highly experienced leader, innovation specialist, and corporate executive. Prior to her appointment as CEO, she ran the education services sector at Creative HQ, and since joining in 2018, she has been involved in the delivery of many of Creative HQ's high-profile projects with industry and government, which we'll learn more about today. Prior to Creative HQ, she had a comprehensive career in investment banking and law in New Zealand and overseas, and her experience includes positions at world-leading corporates such as HSBC, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Linklaters. With her legal and banking experience, she brings valuable insights into the corporate and regulatory environment and a wealth of experience in transaction management, risk mitigation, and decision-making frameworks. She has a passion for sharing her knowledge with early-stage companies and working directly with entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs to help them use their current skills, thinking, and ways of working to create efficiencies in work with a bias towards actions and outcomes. We're so pleased to have her here with us today to learn more about Creative HQ and the work they're doing. So if you're joining us live, you can submit questions at any point during today's conversation in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll take them throughout. So thank you, Catherine and Mercina, and I'll hand things over to you to begin.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And Catherine, thank you for taking the time for this conversation. We are big fans of your work at Creative HQ, and it's a pleasure to have the chance to sit down with you. To start, for those who may not be quite as familiar with your work, I was hoping you could give us a little bit of background on Creative HQ, how it got started, and kind of what you focus on there.
Yeah, sure. Well, kia ora koutou, everybody, and thank you so much. A great big hello from New Zealand. Thank you so much for having me on today. Creative HQ is an innovation business, but it's so much more than a business. It's this world-leading, thriving hub of innovation where leaders and change makers from any sector can come together within our community and take part in our structured innovation programs, workshops, events, sprints. And so we're anchored in Wellington, which is New Zealand's very vibrant and extremely creative capital city. It's a great place to live, a great place to play, a very great place to work. And we came about around 18 years ago was our inception. We are owned by local government here ourselves, and they wanted to have create a place, a supported place where startups could come and learn to grow and be supported in that growth. And so we did that for many, many years, ran a growing incubation program. And then in around 2013, we were looking at trends and the pace that technology was starting to change. And we realized that actually the same tools and methodologies that startups use to grow and experience exponential growth of their businesses, you could apply those same tools and methodologies to government and to corporate to help them to innovate as well. And these days, there's a lot of blurred lines between those sectors. We can't actually view those as siloed sectors anymore. You've got governments who are supporting large startup programs. You've got startups who are building things specifically for corporates. Innovation just needs to be an integrated part of any organisation, large and small, and part of its BAU. So we're here to support and facilitate all of that activity.
Thank you so much for that background. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and your professional journey prior to joining Creative HQ. What inspired you to make the shift from finance to innovation and government accelerator work?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot because they seem like, quite polar opposite things. But look, for me, I view life in chapters, and, when I was younger, becoming a lawyer was something that really excited me. I loved my career as a lawyer. You learn to think in a really highly structured way. You learn to tackle problems, to think about risks very acutely. All of that stuff holds you in good stead for times like these. And had a really vibrant, really energetic career. Lived in London for 13 years, working for large international law firms and investment banks, and worked hard and played hard. And I think for me, life's about chapters and just making the most of every single chapter through which we live. And so there's an age and stage for me where that sort of life was pretty exciting. But once I had children, it was time to return home, to return to my roots. Wellington, New Zealand, it's such a great place to raise a family. And to be around family. And I think for me, becoming a mother means I valued my time differently. And so any time I spend away from my family or any time I spend in the workplace, I was at a stage where I just really wanted to feel truly passionate about what I do, and really empowering myself and others for the future as well. So I discovered innovation practices. I entered this world initially as an investor in startups. That was how I came to know Creative HQ, and then quickly joined them on the team because I could see that within this environment, everyone was having so much fun. So wanted to be a part of that fun, wanted to be part of where the action was. So joined, initially contracted to Creative HQ, worked on some of our really big corporate client work. And then as you said in my intro, became the head of enterprise capability, which is our education services programs here, and now have the absolute pleasure and privilege to be the CEO. Running a company like Creative HQ is no different to running any other company. You're really focused on the financial health of the company and the people health of the company, all of that strategic thinking that comes with my background. Understanding the legal and regulatory obligations with that. It just so happens that I get to do that in an environment with really cool people doing really cool stuff.
I love that. And over the last year, there has been a lot of emphasis on New Zealand, on the incredibly capable response to COVID and the more rational, perhaps, politics that we've encountered there. And I'm wondering, what about the environment there makes it so vibrant and especially hospitable for innovation?
Yeah, cool question. Look, I view New Zealand as a bit of a petri dish for the rest of the world, right? So we have, all of the sophistication of a larger country and a larger city when you talk about Wellington. So we've got really great technology. We've got a world-class education system. We've got fabulous people with a can-do attitude. Kiwi ingenuity is a phrase that's been around for as long as I can remember and beyond. And permissions, and we have a very trusted government here in New Zealand, which is one of the reasons why we've been able to tackle the pandemic so well as a nation. Super strong female leadership. We've always led the charge in the world on female leadership. And so if you bring all that together in one place, with an experimental mindset and a can-do mindset, then actually you've created this really perfect petri dish environment for us to experiment with the huge science and technology capability that we have here in New Zealand, and to be able to come up with solutions to things really quickly, solutions to problems really quickly that benefit not only ourselves as a nation, but actually we can showcase those to the world.
And the last year or even beyond, I'm wondering if you have some examples of the structured innovation programs that Creative HQ has run.
Yeah, sure. So look, right at our heart, I guess, is our incubation program that we run for startups. So we have a rolling intake of startups that come through our doors, many of them in the technology sector, some product startups, some manufacturing type startups. And so through that program, which is well established now, we've been running that for 18 years, there's a commonality across all the entrepreneurs that enter our doors, and that's that they want to build, confidence in using tools of innovation. They want to build capability. They want to know what the tools are, what is the formula and the magic recipe to help me grow a scalable and investable business in a really efficient way. And then they want the community. They want to be connected in to a community of like-minded people who can support that. And that's everything from mentors, advisors, investors, your innovation coaches, just like you get match fit to play a football game, or you actually also need to be match fit to go out there and grow a business. It's hard work. So they come to us through our incubation program really to get those 3 C's, the capability building, the confidence, and the connectedness and innovation, and to grow their businesses for that early investment. Other examples of structured programs, we have a pretty slick accelerator model program now, where teams come to us for 3 months for accelerated growth. And a really great example of that we've run over the last year is for the tourism sector. So before COVID, tourism was our largest export industry here in New Zealand. I think it delivered something like $40.9 billion to the country. And when COVID hit, of course, the borders closed instantly. So that was one of our most impacted sectors here in New Zealand. And we were planning to run an accelerated program for tourism, and that had to be put on ice because our sponsors pulled out of that just as the pandemic hit. We were due to launch that. But then this incredible thing happened, within all the doom and gloom of COVID and everybody trying to just scramble to ensure the health primarily of the population. We saw this resurgence, and it was very much industry-led, where we had, all facets of the tourism industry, from the policy makers to the startups themselves, coming and saying, hey, our industry is so impacted that we need to do something to help them. We actually, we know you had to put your tourism accelerated program on ice, but is there any way that actually we can stand that up again? Can we collaborate together? Can we somehow find a way to run that program? Which we did. So it was industry-led. We had some great startup teams come through that program and build their businesses and pivot and really think about, okay, COVID is here to stay. We can see that the effects are going to be long-lasting. We are still a tourism business. How do we need to pivot to still enable us to grow during this time? So the Tourism Accelerator program was a really great one that we've done. We're about to launch our Climate Response Accelerator. Obviously, huge global trend. It's certainly important here in New Zealand to be able to lead the world in our response to climate change. And so we're just selecting teams for that program now, and there's some great startups who are applying for that. We're super excited. That's going to be run out of here in Wellington. And then we've also, over the last year, run a couple of programs that there's a lot of passion for here amongst my staff at Creative HQ. One is for youth. We're seeing really, really huge growth in this desire from youth to have programs of education that equip them with practical skills and enable them to be in charge of their own destiny. It's a complement to a traditional university education, or it's an alternative to a traditional education. So you've got a lot of passionate youth who feel empowered to be able to solve some of the biggest problems that are facing us, and they certainly have the smarts and the technology skills to be able to do that. And so we run a program called Venture Up, which enables them to grow their own businesses. And then the other one that we ran specifically here in Wellington for Wellington independent artists was called the Punaki Artist Intensive Program. And that was a program where we said, look, the same tools and methodologies, again, that you use to grow a business, how about we apply those to a different sector? New Zealand has some great artists, and particularly in preserving our cultural space. And within Wellington, there's a whole community of independent artists who don't earn a big income but love their craft. And so we said, actually, let's run a program where they can learn to commercialize what they do without compromising what they do. So, there's a nice, I think, collection in there of programs that we've run over the last year that have commercial focus but also have an impact focus.
Thank you so much for sharing those. And I'm curious, you've mentioned a couple of programs that you run within New Zealand, but I know that you're viewed as one of the top GovTech accelerators globally. Do you have some examples of projects that you've run outside of New Zealand?
Yeah, so great question, and that's right. So we are actually viewed as the world's #1 GovTech program in the world. If you Google us, try it at home now, run a little experiment at Google GovTech, we should come up as your #1 hit. And I think, again, that's because we do have a very agile government here in New Zealand who has done a lot of world-leading initiatives. There's a lot of permission within New Zealand to innovate within government. Within our international ecosystem, we've done some work with our friends across the ditch in Australia, where we are helping them effectively build their own creative HQ. And we love that. It's a compliment to us. We never think we're going to run out of work. We want everybody to copy our model. So that's begun really with training staff within a local government authority over there to actually be innovators themselves and to know how to run their own efficient programs of innovation. And we always do that with live projects. So, the government department brings in projects that they want to get done anyway, and they bring those in, and we run them through a year-long program to actually build their own innovation ecosystem within their own government agency. And when you do it that way, you're building a very sustainable offering for that government department. The idea is that after 2 or 3 years of working with us, they don't need us anymore. That's what success looks like. People don't need us anymore. They can innovate by themselves. Further afield from that, we've done some work in Singapore around smart cities. We've done some work in the Philippines, really looking at ease of doing business and how they improve their ease of doing business world ranking with the World Bank. And so there's a heavy focus through all of those projects on things like e-governance, increasing transparency, removing duplication from the system, all of these things that make for a faster, more efficient, more inclusive government.
And what do you think is, or maybe what are some of the more impactful Gov case projects you've done within New Zealand?
Yeah, so look, we've got a whole range now. We've run government innovation programs across almost every sector in New Zealand with almost every government agency at some pretty large scale project kind of end of the spectrum there. We've done some work, for example, with Transpower, who owns and operates our national grid, so the high voltage transmission network that carries the electricity all around the country. I think they have something like 12,000 kilometres of transmission lines and more than 170 substations across the country. And they came to us with a problem. Well, we've done quite a lot of work with Transpower, but they came to us with a problem, for example, that they had these aging tower assets, that, the actual physical towers that have the electricity lines running through them were corroding, and that was costing them millions of dollars each year. And so if they continue to just maintain those towers the way they always had, you're always going to get the same outcome. And we know that the same outcome was losing them a lot of money. And so they came to us and did a relatively short format program, actually, we call it a 10-day challenge. It's almost like 2 back-to-back design sprints, if people know about design sprints. And within that, you take people from different parts of the business, cross-functional units. You take people that have an open, agile mindset to new ways of working, and you put them all in. We create a war room here. Don't know if that's a particularly nice word, but it does feel like when you're innovating at pace on big, gnarly problems that you're really down in the trenches together, problem solving together and grouping in. And across that 10 days, we came up with a really creative solution, something that they wouldn't have come up with otherwise had they just followed a BAU process, which the bottom line for them was actually, millions of dollars of real money that they've been saved from the bottom line of their balance sheet. Another example would be working with the Ministry of Education. We ran a number of summits around the country to actually redesign the entire education system for New Zealand. We had an education system that had been in place for many, many years, and our wonderful modern government came and said, look, we want to redesign the education system, but we don't just want to sit in our offices and with our policymakers and redesign the system. We'd actually like to get input truly from the sector. So we entered into a true co-design process with them, where we ran a number of summits all around New Zealand, and you bring together into a room leaders and change makers from the education sector, but also, the people who are actually working in it every day, teachers, school principals, students. And in particular, you want to aim to have in that room people who don't typically input into processes such as this. And so in doing that, you need to find really modern ways to engage in those people, right? There's a reason why those people don't typically engage in those processes. So we brought them together and had these very interactive summits where the government could gather all of the information it needed, the insights that they needed to be able to redesign the education system. In addition to that, we run an annual, what we call a GovTech Accelerator program, and we're just recruiting for that this year, where we bring together teams from lots of different government agencies and we bring them all into our offices. We have international teams in this as well. If there's any international government agencies listening who'd like to enter a team, they can join virtually. And we bring them together into one program where they get to create their own community for the 12 weeks of the program. They're all working on their own individual projects. And projects in there have been everything from, those infrastructure problems around transport systems to developing new models of social housing, to tackling issues relating to ageing populations such as senior wellness, saving the native bird population of New Zealand, engaging with smart cities. So a whole variety of projects that come in and follow the process.
I love that. And I especially appreciate the point about engaging individuals who maybe aren't traditionally sitting at the table opining on new solutions or challenges that an organization or government might be facing. And I'm wondering, one of the questions from the audience is about how you encourage diversity in organizations. And I imagine, diversity of opinion and background and all of these things and how that plays in innovation more generally.
Yeah, and look, that's such a great question. I love that question, and it's something that we do a lot of work around here at Creative HQ with our clients, because we know that actually to have a really thriving, really prosperous society, you need to be inclusive, and you need to be creating for diverse and increased diversity, as the world's becoming more sophisticated, more open. And so all innovation starts with a problem, right? So when we're looking at diversity and how do we get more of it, we actually unpack the problem of why do you not have enough diversity to begin with. And so we really get some pretty honest conversations going around that, and not just conversations from people in the room, but actually we encourage the clients we work with to actually go out and talk to people. You start with a hypothesis. All innovation starts with a hypothesis around the problem. And then we say, okay, you've got a hypothesis that you're not being diverse enough. Who are the groups that you don't think you're reaching? Go out and have a conversation with them and understand why they're not engaging with you. View the world through their lens. So it's a very human-centered design approach. And then once you understand the world through their lens, and you have to create a really honest and a really safe conversation for them to even come to the table and join that, then you can enter into a design process that involves them, where you're designing specifically for them. And there's a theory that, if you're designing for the most diverse, and you're designing, for the people who aren't typically feeling truly included in a place, then you're also designing for the majority.
I I love this. I'm here taking notes because I feel like this is good advice, and I really appreciate it. And I'm wondering, kind of related to that, I feel there's a myth that innovation just sort of happens. It's the magic of the moment, right? And then you have a brilliant idea and the rest is history. But it seems like you're kind of distilling these perennially or these perennial truths about innovation into formulas that can be shared across industries and I'm wondering if maybe you can shed light on some of the principles of innovation that you find particularly useful as you coach all of these different entities.
Yeah, and that's so true, isn't it? Because, you know, we talked about before, you wouldn't step onto a sports field without some coaching. We feel the same about innovation. So, look, we follow 4 main methodologies here at Creative HQ: Lean Startup, Agile in practice, design thinking, which is about human-centered design, and co-design. So those are the practices that we follow here. We have a toolbox of tools underpinning those, which we're always refreshing. It's about tools, not rules here. So, you know, we can click those tools together and create structured programs of innovation, which really give people a way of mitigating risk as they go through. And I think that's important because innovation is often seen as risky business. Actually, we think following a true structured process through innovation mitigates the risk. It enables people to experiment in a really fast fashion. And so within that, there's lots of tips and tricks and cheeky rules that we can share. You know, within Lean Startup, for example, you know, there's the 2 pizza team. So there's the theory that if you can't feed your team on 2 pizzas, then your team's too big. There's lots of collaboration in there and about having balanced programs of innovation and innovation teams. So we have a tool here at Creative HQ called the CH3. We can make that available online if people would like to do that tool. It's built into all of our programs, and it's about understanding what your particular profile is within a team. You know, are you what we call a hero, a hacker, a hustler, or a creative? And that any innovation team needs a balanced profile of people working on the team. It's about understanding the skill sets that you bring and where those gaps are and how you fill those gaps. It's truly approaching things from the client's lens. At the end of the day, innovation, no matter what sector you're at, is about customer service. So technology will enable that in a really great way. Technology is enabling people to do things that they were never able to do before and to be more creative in their solutions. But at the same time, the problems that we're trying to solve are becoming more complex. So it's understanding that innovation is actually about problem solving, but there's technology available that will enable that, but it's producing better customer service. And so you have to truly understand what the problem is that you're solving. You need to hold that as your lodestar. Keep coming back to that. Every activity that I do, am I still solving that problem for the customer? And then understanding what the solution is, adopting an experimental mindset. So being prepared to run experiments, being prepared to fail fast, understanding that that's a good thing, understanding that's a thing to be celebrated. And then truly, I guess, some internal reflection of, are you wanting to play it safe here and come out with incremental improvements to something? Or are you truly prepared to take a leap of faith into the dark, you know, in the hope that you're going to build something that's transformational, that has transformational outcomes? And I guess one of the fields where you'll really see that having a true impact on society is in government innovation. But at the end of the day, look, our strapline here at Creative HQ is that entrepreneurs are everywhere. We believe that everybody has an entrepreneurial idea inside them. The difference between an entrepreneur and a non-entrepreneur is that the entrepreneurs actually get out of bed and do something about it. And it's not the idea happens and magic happens overnight. You know, if you think of all of the great companies that we can all, you know, talk about, Ubers and Airbnbs, those are international examples that are used often. If I had $1 for every time someone told me Airbnb was their idea, I'd be a very, very rich person. You know, the difference is somebody actually did something about it, and it didn't happen overnight. It happened with a lot of sweat and tears, and probably a lot of eating 2-minute noodles as well.
So much brilliant advice there. I especially love the idea of innovation at its core being about customer service. I think that's really, really valuable. And I'm wondering, in all of your work with different governments, what are the perennial pain points, especially over the last year? I think we've all become more aware of how maybe archaic different government processes are. And with the pandemic, things have been pushed to be updated, I think, a little bit more aggressively, but we're still seeing that many governments are kind of stuck in these old systems, and innovation takes a very long time. Science is complicated, and so I'm wondering, what are the issues that you usually are sorting through with governments, if they can be reduced to kind of broader topics? That would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, look, so governments are looking really for, in a nutshell, they're looking for a better, a faster, and a more inclusive way to serve their citizens. You know, because again, we talked just before about customer service and startups and private sector, but actually governments are about customer service as well. That's why they exist. Their customers are citizens. And in a world where we can book a holiday, you know, order a pizza, do our banking all on our mobile phones, people expect that same level of service now from government. And technology is a way to enable that. The barriers that exist to that typically are getting the permissions. So when you look at the way a political system is structured, generally we, in a democratic society such as you have, such as we have here in New Zealand, politicians are elected. So they need to show how they are better serving customers. And one of the dialogues that we're often having here is that, again, it's about innovation is not about taking on risk. Innovation actually is about mitigating risk. It's about looking at how governments can reduce cost, stand up new services to citizens or better service to citizens faster. And it's about incorporating technology so that they can provide a better service to customers that meets the expectations that they have from all of the stuff that they can do in the private sector world. And so getting permissions from those senior government ministers and chief executives to innovate is key. Having it aligned, the innovation activity and the projects that you do to become innovative, is having those aligned to the strategic direction of any government department. And then it's just really about having leaders and change makers, and they exist. God, it's just such smart people working within government who understand, you know, everyone from the frontline people who are actually doing the day-to-day engaging with citizens and hearing the complaints about the service, because, you know, we're always quick to complain about public service, aren't we? But not quick to compliment it. So it's taking all of those insights and knowledge and ideas that those people have, and then, you know, the middle tier leaders and change makers who truly feel passionate about the citizens that they're serving in their particular agency. And again, giving them a recipe book, showing them a process in a way that empowers them to think like, actually, I can make this change within government.
You mentioned earlier, and I'm not surprised hearing all of these wonderful insights coming from you, that you're not really ever worried about running out of projects or work to do. I think you're truly inundated, and I'm wondering how you determine which projects to take on board, given the amount of traffic that you're receiving.
Yeah, another good question. And we look at, we're very tapped into the ecosystem around us. So again, we don't presume to know everything, just like we encourage our clients to go out and talk to people where we're doing the same thing. So we're really tapped into our ecosystem, particularly the government. We look at the trends and the big issues that people are wanting to solve. So the big gnarly government issues at the moment are things, I think, globally around climate response, obviously the health pandemic, the future of work. Many nations, New Zealand included, have an aging population. So how do you cater to that? we listen very closely when Jacinda Ardern talks about the top 10 problems she wants to solve for the country that year, and we say we can help you with those, of course, all of them, and we can do that in a year. So yeah, we're just very tapped into to our ecosystem and the reports and trend reports that are released.
And you mentioned a little bit about the way COVID forced you to reevaluate some of the projects that you were doing. But I'm wondering if you can speak more to the way that your work has changed based on COVID over the last 15 months.
Yeah, and look, we have seen an increased demand for us, which puts us in a really privileged position. I think innovation has emerged as the most essential ingredient in any modern economy. Through this pandemic, it's critical, and critical is an intentional word there, to innovate, because COVID's accelerated a whole heap of problems that I think people thought were coming upon them, particularly in government. We've probably had 10 years worth of acceleration of those problems happen, in a year. And with that comes an accelerated need to use technology to solve those problems. Because the scale and the speed with which those problems have been thrust upon us has increased. So first of all, the first step to that really is about demystifying the technology for people so that they then feel like they can adopt it to enable innovation. So a big part of the work that we've seen in the shift in the work is in this urgency to understand what innovation is, for starters, because suddenly there's permission to innovate. So people need to understand what innovation is. They need to understand what technology is, because the pace that technology is changing is accelerating. So if we don't understand something, our general human nature is to shy away from it. So it's about leaning into it, to use a little bit of a Sheryl Sandberg term, lean into it and really understand, demystify what the technology is, and figure out how we can use that to solve the big, gnarly problems that are thrust upon us.
And I'm wondering how you see the role of technology accelerating post-pandemic. You said that you've had an increase of interest in your work, and particularly in the public sector. Do you find increased appetite for implementing not just, these little incremental changes, but more far foundational innovations?
Yeah, absolutely, because the problems are so big, right? I mean, 2 years ago, was anybody investing a lot of money in global health pandemics or mitigating those? No, because it wasn't actually a thing. And I guess, necessity is the mother of all invention. That's not new. But when you have something like COVID hit, everything becomes heightened and the necessity becomes greater. And so, all innovation, one of the keys to success is understanding whether you're actually solving an urgent problem. Well, COVID's brought us lots of urgent problems, and whether you're solving a problem that's big scale-wise. And of course, again, we've seen that through the pandemic. The fact that technology exists, the fact that it's increasing in pace is fantastic, to be able to come up with solutions for that. And I guess now what we've really seen is a trend here where governments are saying, okay, there was stuff we wanted to do anyway, now we're forced to do it. So we can't put it off for another year or another 6 months. We actually have to do it now. And funding and resources available from governments to do it. And they're saying, look, because COVID has forced us to think about doing things differently, because it's presented new problems to us that we must solve now if we're going to keep our economy functioning and if we're going to keep people alive and healthy, then let's actually do it properly. So let's start with a blank sheet of paper and let's aim towards transformational change as opposed to incremental change in the way that we do things. So that's pretty cool, and I actually feel pretty optimistic about the future, certainly of New Zealand, but actually globally, when you think about here is the excuse and the opportunity for governments to truly turn their resources internally towards their own economies and start with a blank page and aim for not just an incrementally improved government, but a transformed government.
Absolutely. No, that's very encouraging to hear. And I'm we have a lot of questions actually from the audience, and one of them relates to how you apply this innovation mindset internally at Creative HQ. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh yeah, this is such a fun place to work, and we love visitors. So, once travel opens up, make sure you come and pay us a visit here. We have a team of really, really passionate and really clever people who work hard, and so we try to what we call eat our own dog food here. So we run agile processes ourselves here at Creative HQ. When COVID first hit, one of our big challenges was we had a lot of in-person services that we were delivering, including to international markets where we were hopping on planes and going over. And to keep that work going, we suddenly had to work out how to change it to a virtual world. And I think we've all learned through this period, you can't just take what you would do in person and do it on a Zoom screen. That's going to mentally exhaust people. It's not going to be engaging. You can't feel the energy that you feel when you're in a room. So we had to invent new ways of delivering those services and keeping those projects going. And so we ran our own design sprint. We had a design sprint team here at Creative HQ that came up with a new way of delivering those services during lockdown. We have regular, what we call on the business days here at Creative HQ, where we create cross-functional teams here within our business. And for one day, every couple of months, which is scheduled into our timetable, people are in cross-functional teams working on projects internally for us as a business. So lots of cool stuff going on here where we're living and breathing innovation methodologies.
It sounds like a wonderful place to and I think we're all looking for somewhere to visit when we actually can. So New Zealand is top of my list. But another question we received relates to partner organizations and how you determine, or whether you determine to partner with an additional organization on any of these design sprints or other innovation programs.
Yeah, absolutely. So the partnership model is a big part of us being able to expand our reach and do all of the great work that we do. So we're very open to partnering, and we partner regularly with government. We partner with other innovation services providers. We partner with cultural expertise agencies, for example, to be able to expand our reach and deliver a better service. We're very into models of collaboration and co-opetition here at Creative HQ. As mentioned before, we truly don't believe we're going to run out of work. In fact, we're on this mission to make the world a more innovative place, and we only see work in that sector continuing. We also, it's important, I think, to point out that the way we work with clients is in partnership. So when customers come to us, one of the big differences between us and a traditional consultancy work, and even in the innovation space, is customer doesn't come to us and say, there's a problem I want solved. You use the tools and methodologies of innovation to solve it for us, and then deliver us that 80-page report that we can present to our chief exec and then sit on a shelf. Instead, what we're trying to do is create sustainable programs of innovation within all of the customers that we work with. So when you come to us, the way we work is we say, bring your team of people in. We don't come up with the participants for a design sprint, run the design sprint and give you the prototype back. What we do is say, bring your own people in to do the design sprint with us, or bring your group of people here. We will turn them into innovation specialists and innovation consultants through running them through our education program. So we're always working in partnership with our customers to build their own confidence, capability, connectedness, and innovation.
Another question we received relates to entrepreneurs working to build companies in developing nations with minimal resources, and whether you have any specific guidance or advice for individuals and entrepreneurs who find themselves in that position.
Yeah, and look, we have done some work in developing nations as well, including with startup teams, and some of the work we did particularly was sponsored by large corporates. So thinking of Fonterra, one example we did was with Fonterra, which is New Zealand's largest company. And they actually deployed a team of people to work within a developing nation around milk products. They're a dairy company, and actually how can they work with the local economy there, which was very poor, to give them better access to milk products. Innovation is about being really creative in how you solve problems. So any budget can innovate, and in fact, innovation is about doing things, running low-cost experiments for the most impact. So we can work with any budget and we can work with any problem, and there's always a way to be able to create the funding that you need, whether that's through partnerships, whether it's through investment, whether it's working with philanthropists. You know, if you're solving a problem in a way that's going to create an enormous impact, then there will be champions who you can adopt into your team who will help you do that.
Thank you for that. And another question we received asks how regional collaboration amongst fintech entrepreneurs and governments is proceeding in the region, including the Pacific Islands. How can other regions also get connected with existing work that's taking place?
Yeah, so again, you know, this is part of having a solid ecosystem that you can tap into. So we work pretty closely with our Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade. They're a customer of ours, and we do several projects with them. Increasingly, startups are designing things for government agencies. And often, particularly, for example, in our GovTech Accelerator program, some staff from that government agency will come and be participants in that program, but then we will help them find true entrepreneurs or startup teams to work on those projects with them, so that they are collectively, collaboratively, you know, coming up with the solution for whatever the region is. The Pacific Rim, you know, it's a collection of pretty close nations. We have really good political relationships there, and so the New Zealand government invests a lot of money in aid programs for them and helping again them to create their own sustainable economies.
So much of the work that you do relates to improving the way teams function and individuals relate to each other, and you mentioned that you can't just take what you would do in person and translate it into the world. And I'm wondering how your approach has changed over the last year, and what pieces that have changed are you keen to keep with you post-pandemic, and which you're most keen to get rid of?
Yeah, for sure. And look, I think we're not alone in this. And I know New Zealand is very lucky in that society is pretty much functioning as normal now, right? Where, you know, we're having large rock concerts together and we're in crowded restaurants because we don't have any cases of COVID in New Zealand. But what we saw initially was, of course, necessity forced people to be working from home and not being able to be connected with other people other than via the screen. And so there were a lot of learnings about how we need to run workshops, sprints, programs of activity using technology that was digital. So it's a combination of Zoom. We have things like Miro whiteboards, which are really great for collaborative working on, but all of the things that we normally do to get energy in a room, the types of energizers we do, the types of team bonding exercises have to change. And also the timing and cadence of programs and workshops have to change, because whilst we can easily spend 8 hours a day together, 5 days a week in a room doing a design sprint, that level of intensity on a screen is just not healthy for people. So we would typically adjusting the cadence and the length of those programs. So a 5-day design sprint, we were suddenly spreading over a month to enable people to have that mix of screen time, but also time away from the screen while still maintaining some sort of intensity of work. So we would just change some of the work that you would typically do after a design sprint. We would bring in to the process. So you were away from your screen doing that in the afternoons and you were on screen in the mornings, for example. But what we've seen really as our society has returned back to normal is more and more people wanting to come and engage in person again. And but with additional flexibility. So we want the ability to do both. Creative HQ and our services and our practices will certainly maintain the ability to do both. But people really actually still want to get into a room and connect with other human beings in a meaningful way. We'll certainly continue to have our increased international presence within our programs. So suddenly now we've realised we actually don't have to hop on an aeroplane and be somewhere in person to be able to add value. So our network of international mentors and advisors that we have in our programs will continue. It's fantastic now that people are more open-minded to actually doing things like we're doing today, Mercina, and also making guest appearances via Zoom, and that's an acceptable way to get some expertise into the room and knowledge into the room. So I think it's a return to some in-person time. People want to connect in person still. It's keeping some flexibility there that people have got. Work and home are no longer so segregated now. It's about how can we incorporate both and still live a meaningful life and a life that feels like we've got balance in it. But it's actually recognising that technology, everyone suddenly being proficient on Zoom is a great thing for being able to have international collaboration and presence in our programs.
Absolutely, and we have definitely found the same thing. We've been so encouraged by our ability to include a much broader audience in the convenings that we host, and folks are so eager to meet again in person, and it's very encouraging to speak to you and to see New Zealand as a model that, life can return, hopefully to something that resembles normalcy. So I'm cognizant of the time, but just to wrap things up, in many of the industries in which you've worked, whether finance or innovation, they tend to be fairly male-dominated fields. I'm wondering if you have advice for women who are interested in getting involved, but maybe a little bit hesitant because of that stigma.
Yeah, what a wonderful question. And I love female empowerment. Look, I have worked in traditionally male-dominated areas, and within that, constantly I've had female role models and women I aspire to, and I think we can all name those people. I guess my paradigm that I grew up in is in a country that's always empowered women. We were the first country in the world to give females the vote, for example. We've got strong female leadership, and particularly at the moment in our Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who's known globally. I think the answer is, for me personally, and this is just a personal reflection that I'll share with you, my way through is not to change who I am, to try and operate like a bloke in a bloke's world. Actually, be authentic. There's a lot of qualities that females have which are truly valuable in any environment, in any workspace. So be your authentic self and actually have the confidence to get involved and to follow your dream and your passion. Innovation is about, at the end of the day for me, it's about turning hopes and dreams into a commercial reality for people, or an impact reality, depending on what it is that you're trying to create by way of outcomes. And so just hold true to that. Tap into a network like ours, where there's heaps of females doing cool stuff. Be supported, and remember that we are truly all here to lift each other up and to collaborate. It's not about stealing each other's ideas or pushing each other down. It's about doing stuff that we all feel really passionate about and enabling that in other people around us.
Well, I feel like I could just talk to you for another hour, but we are coming up on time, so I will just close by asking the last question which we received, which is, unsurprisingly, is Creative HQ hiring?
Yes, we are. I'm really proud to say, actually, in this in the last year, we've increased our team size by almost 50%. We are still on the lookout. So if we've got some amazing people out there, which I know we will, who would like to work for us, we're certainly happy to receive CVs. We also want to work with great people. So again, as I said, we've got applications open at the moment for 2 of our flagship programs, our GovTech Accelerator program and our Climate Response Accelerator program. So if you are out there listening and you're part of you work for government and you'd like to make change within government, have a talk to us about how you might be able to enter your team into our GovTech Accelerator. Likewise, if you've got a climate response team, make contact with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And it has been truly a pleasure to chat with you over the last hour. And with that, Sophia, I will hand things back over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mercina.